Welcome to 2023 with Agnes Kunkel. In 2020, the world was hit by COVID-19. It was like a time machine. Find out what the world might look like in spring 2023 and how we will need to adapt. 2023, your window to a world beyond COVID-19. June 2023. Time for the Millers to go on their first big summer vacation to Egypt after the COVID pandemic back in 2020. Thomas and Xenia were worried for the health of their kids traveling with a plane over the last 2 years. But they heard all about the new and safe technology at the airports to make traveling less risky. Arriving at the airport, the family uses the automated check-in services that utilizes biometric data to match the information from the passport with the person. Melanie and Christy have a lot of fun with the self-check-in service, trying to trick the face scanner with funny facial expressions. In order to avoid people queuing too closely at the security, the airport uses 3D X-ray scanners to screen carry-on bags without making travelers remove electronic devices and liquids. Though suddenly, Christy places her carry-on bag on the scanner. All the lights started blinking red, with a loud, uncomfortable noise echoing through the hall. Thomas instantly gets nervous. Xenia told him to check the bags for the girls at home before they left for the airport, but he completely forgot. He is feeling quite anxious right away. A lady from the airport staff comes along to check Christy's bag. "So, what do we have here?" And in her hand, she holds a large Nutella jar removed from the girl's bag. Thomas explains to Christy that the Nutella counts as a liquid and is not allowed on the plane. Christy is disappointed. "I'm going to starve in Egypt." After the situation is resolved, to Christy's disappointment, the family walks through a clothing and shoe scanning technology, allowing the travelers to keep everything, shoes, wallets, jackets, electronics and more, right where they are. Finally, sitting in front of their gate and waiting for the boarding of the plane, Xenia opens the app At Your Gate on her phone and uses the on-gate side food delivery service within the airport. The girls want brownies. Thomas and Xenia are ordering cheese sandwiches. After finishing her brownie, which she quite obviously liked, "Maybe Egypt has some nice food that I can eat in a few days."
Hello, I'm Agnes Kunkel, your host in 2023, your window to the world beyond COVID-19. We have now over 36,516,000 confirmed cases and over 1 million people have died with COVID-19. Today we have 9th of October and our guest today is Tomislav Lang. Tomislav Lang was born in an entrepreneurial family dedicated to tourism and aviation. For 20 years, he has held senior management positions in the aviation industry. He is a dedicated coach for soccer and basketball, and he thinks training and learning is the fundament of any success. His motto is, "You have to ignite inside yourself for the things you want to bring to others." Tomislav, happy to have you here in our show.
Ms. Kunkel, hello, thank you.
I always like to start with a personal question. During this pandemic, how did you personally come through this month of pandemic and disruption?
Well, it was a full stop, like for everybody. Was time that we could use for ourselves and to analyze the situation. As much as you would like to stay at home the whole day, for me it was totally clear that there is no other chance than to start to move ahead again. So we found ourselves in the situation to kick in with work again, to find new things that have to be done. We had 24 hours homeschooling with our kids. That was as well something we had to look after. But basically it was just like in every situation, in every crisis, just go ahead and go on.
And how was family life during the pandemic when you have to stay at home?
Well, family life is always great, but I think our kids and and ourselves were very happy that we're back to school now. The first few days was good for everyone, but it was nice to see that also the kids understood that school is something very nice, and not having the parents around every day is also something nice.
When we think about the pandemic and aviation, and especially airports, first of all, we think about hygiene measurements, keeping distance, cleaning systems, no touch surfaces. What would you expect will be still in place in 2023 when pandemic is over?
Well, pandemic will be over, but a lot of things will have changed because we're changing already today. The measurements we have taken in the last few months and weeks are very extraordinary. Very special to see is that in Europe, German aviation companies and airports adopted very quick. They had to move very quick. And it's nice to see that we really, I mean, this is what makes Germany great, is that most of the people are looking after themselves and they're looking after the whole situation. And I think there's good things that we learn from it, and that we are prepared for the next thing that will come, that will be different. But at least if it's not a pandemic, hopefully not, we will have learned to move quicker and to be very focused on the things that happen.
I have looked up some tech trends prognosticized for airports and aviation before the pandemic. And one buzzword was the digital shift, that we have to expect a lot of more digitalization in the aviation and airport industry. Is that right? Is that still a direction we will go ahead?
Yes, it will. We have to go ahead because digitalization makes our world quicker and easier. That's something what we're always looking after, and it's making us more efficient. Although I have to say, we are already digitalized a lot. That's not all the things that the end customer sees, but if you look after baggage, if you look of the process, how you book your flight today, how you check in, how you communicate with your airport and your final destination, that has changed rapidly in the last 10 years. You're being informed quite quickly. And what will change is that we will have to really focus on what is necessary, what is sensible, and to still keep aviation as it is. It's a people's business. So there will be no chance to have a flight digitalized, because at the end I have to sit in the airplane by myself.
When we go to an airport, like the family in the narrative at the beginning of our episode in 2023, will we still meet people?
Yes, hopefully. Yes, hopefully. Very important, and I hope so. There's a lot of great people working at these airports, doing a great job every day. People we don't even see, cleaning the airplanes at night, preparing food in the whole departments that we have contracted worldwide. And just because of that, hopefully, yes. And I'm quite sure that it will remain like that for a long time. I learned aviation, as you said at the beginning, 40 years ago almost. And there's not too many things that have changed, actually. Flying is something that has to do with safety. It has to do with feeling comfortable. And no computer can make you feel as comfortable as a private person.
When I go now to the airport, like here in Munich, and I drop off my luggage, it looks to me as it is already quite automized.
Yes, and you're totally right. There is a lot of automatization going on already. As I said, in the background, even more than you think. If you look at the airplanes and the whole infrastructure we have built there, there's already a lot of things that are not analog anymore. A lot of digital things going on in the airplanes and with the ground handlers and with the airports, which is necessary because with the traffic density we had, a human being alone could not match all of the questions that something like that would have brought up. Today we're going back a little bit on the analog side because there's not too much traffic, unfortunately, but it will come back again. But yes, and your example is just one of many.
Mr. Lang, we talked about automatization in the airport. Are there limits to that trend?
There are limits, certainly. I cannot look into the far future, but nowadays we are living in a colorful aviation world. Just to give you one example, there is not one type of airplane. There is many type of manufacturers with many types of airplanes. We have a high density on the airport aprons, and therefore, for example, robotics will have their use. Let's take, for example, the bus that is carrying the passengers to the airplane. That's something that I see could be automated very quickly, and there is already a few tests at some German airports that were held. But as soon as it comes closer to the airplane, it will be more complicated and more complex, and therefore I would not say no forever, but for the time being, the limit is there.
So you have already used the possibilities of automatization in the background handling, and
a lot of are used, a lot of others have to be implemented, and then comes the question of investment and on how will the future look like.
When I drove to this to hold this interview with you, Mr. Lang, and of course this airport is not brand new, but it has this little bit futuristic ambient and this. I cannot hesitate. Typically, as you understand, we are about 2023, which is the near future. And I'm standing here in the airport. I have to talk to you a little bit about the wider future, maybe 10 years, 20 years, as there are so unbelievable, to me, unbelievable ideas about vertiports, drones lifting persons, and urban air mobility. I guess when you are working here, you are close to these futuristic discussions, and it would be wonderful if you can give us a few impressions about these. Is this just fantasy?
Well, if we will be beamed up to a starship or not, I cannot tell you that. That is beyond my thinking. Maybe in a galaxy far, far away. But if we come back and look at our world here in which we live, Airport Munich is a very modern and a very futuristic airport, actually. Okay. They invest a lot in modern technology, and this is why it's one of the most important hubs in Europe, and a 5-star airport, which is categorized by big companies. Many other airports in Europe are either not open anymore because they didn't survive the downturn after 2008, or their infrastructures are so old that they have no futuristic approach at all. So to answer your question, I think, yes, there will be vertiports. I think there will be drones. I looked into this as well, and I find it very interesting, but it will not solve infrastructural problems we have. Aviation is working professionally for so many years. There's a good reason why we have to use long runways in order to take off with many passengers. And the small vertiports or projects that we have with air taxis, that will be something for a very specific niche. What I find much more interesting, and this is something we're looking into with my personal side company, with Lavex, is how can we build traffic that is sensible, that is economically correct, and how can we bring all those stakeholders together? Because it's not ending with the airplane, it starts actually with how do you get to your airport. And I see regions already today in Germany, if you take a look into the eastern part of Germany, the infrastructure getting from home to the next airport, it's quite a ride. So maybe we should look into how to get those people sensibly to the airport, looking after emissions as well, being eco-friendly in this sense as well, But flying as such will remain as it is for a long time.
Okay, so not so many drones, but typical runways and
Yes.
big airports, and maybe different type of airplanes,
Definitely.
like different fuels, hydrogen, electricity. Will we see stuff like that?
We already see it today. If you look back with what type of airplanes we flew just maybe 30 years ago, that was enormously loud and enormously dirty airplanes. Today, most of aviation companies use high technologized airplane models within Europe. We are already very CO2 friendly. If you look it up in a global perspective, just the senseful meaning of how I use this transportation vehicle, maybe this has gotten out of hand a little bit by traveling every day for a few euros, where your taxi drive to the inner city is much more expensive. But Airbus, with this crisis, already announced that there will be, and there is big studies going on with hydrogen fuel, with electricity fuel. Norway, for example, has a clear goal and has clearly defined how they will get out of the regional network with only electricity, and how to have non-fossil fuel in their airplanes. And this will come, and I also hope that this will come, because this again will be something new to aviation. This will create jobs. This will bring the whole perspective on traveling on a new flight level, and this is something we have to do, and it will come, and it's already on the way, and hopefully much quicker than we thought.
When we hopefully, Mr. Lang, meet again in 2023 here in this airport, at the moment it's not really full capacity used. We expected, I guess, a doubling of air transportation or air travel by 2037, before pandemic times. What would you guess is the growth path for the aviation industry now after this disruption by pandemics?
Well, this is a tough question. That's a very tough question, because first of all, we have to know when the pandemic will be over. If you listen to scientists, which I recommend highly also when it comes to crisis, listen to experts and ask for their view from the outside. They cannot tell us when the pandemic will be over. And it depends also a lot on how politics and humans will react to this crisis. But let's say, and let's sketch that the pandemic already today is under a better control than it was when it hit us first. There will be downsizes and there will be upsides to this whole thing. It will stabilize next year. That's something also we can only look into something similar we had with 2008, that we had with New York and the towers on September 11. We see that aviation is the first one to be hit strong and the last one to get out. And the same thing will happen now again. So I think next year stabilization, and the growth that was pre-calculated will be just shifted a few years back, which I think is good because it gives us time to reanalyze, look back, invest in new technologies, and maybe this investment into new technologies will change this whole perspective on the growth. But one more thing I have to add here is that growth as we had was not economically good for everyone. So we should also look onto this fact. How can we change this perspective? How can the whole aviation sector become greener? Just to be a part of many other industries that have to become greener. It's not only aviation, but aviation was always, and this is the futuristic thing about us, we are going after innovation. That is the futuristic thing with us. And that's something we will do. And my experts and any other experts in this world are doing the right thing, looking into the future and being positive.
So I understand you correctly that you would not be surprised that when the pandemic is over and aviation is coming back, we go again on a steady growth path?
We will go on to a steady growth path again, but we will be hit by the next crisis again. That is for sure. If you look into the past of aviation, every 10 years, approximately it's 10 years,
then we
run into the next crisis.
We have a bang.
Yes, and maybe we should also look into this. How can we project with maybe digital sectors? How can we maybe project possible hits to the industry, and how could we prepare? Because at the moment we are reacting. How can we be proactive in this? That's maybe a question we should talk about next time.
You are also an expert on cargo. And as I understood that you had been personally involved in bringing in face masks and protective equipment in this very first troublesome time when nobody knew anything.
Yes.
So what was exactly your job, and what did you do in these days?
Well, that's something when it comes to crises, also generally spoken, aviation companies were asked to help, because we can bring in and we can solve things when it comes to long distances very quickly. The aviation industry has great pilots. We have room for cargo. We can bring back passengers, which the German state did with Lufthansa, Condor, and others. And again, they asked for help how to bring back and how to deliver face masks in order to protect people. So that's the beauty of the game with aviation. We're really, and this is why I love this aviation industry. On the one hand, we're offering very nice service when it comes to meeting people, meeting family, going on vacation, but we can also be a problem solver when it comes to crises. And all of us in aviation, we were involved by carrying those face masks from China back to Germany.
And was it you flew to China, or how did you manage it?
Well, there was airlines that flew to China. They had built smaller hubs close to China, and they decided to basically reinstall the whole capacity. So passenger planes became cargo airplanes, and those airplanes were transferred into the near vicinity of China. And on a daily basis, they flew up to 30, 40 tons of medical equipment from China through Kazakhstan or other airports, because they have to refuel, most of them, not all of them, and brought those things back to Germany.
So the stop in Kazakhstan was just for refueling, or?
Mainly, yes. Mainly to exchange the crew, to exchange equipment, because a flight from China all through Germany has its limits on the airplane, also on the crew limitation, and you want to be safe on that. Cargo has to be flown safely, not only passengers. And this is why airlines have built their hubs. So there was many of them who did it, and I think they did a great job. It was something, how quickly everyone adopt. That is also something. Aviation, we are really quick. It was incredible for all of us. It was like, okay, tomorrow we fly cargo. Okay, now we're cargo airplanes. Let's do it.
And so you personally went to Kazakhstan, and
yes, I had the luck that with my employer, who asked me if I could be one of the cargo managers on those flights, and you asked me at the beginning, how did I react to the crisis? Well, that was our reaction. We said, okay, we're on board. We will do this. And it was fascinating to see how far away we flew and how calm it was in those big mega cities as well. We flew over Shanghai, and Shanghai was basically sleeping. It was sleeping. At the airport, there was nothing. And that was quite an experience, which I'm very thankful for, and it was nice to see that the world is a small village at the end of the day. It's a really small village.
What about the supply chain? You had some ideas that it might be. Is it a good idea to have supply chains that are so concentrated maybe on China or what do you think about supply chains?
Well, after I've seen that, that's just my personal thinking on that is that it makes sense as long as we're in a standard mode. Mm-hmm. But we have seen that with this crisis, this chain was just cut in the same moment. So we also have to think about how can we manage that in the next thing, and it will come. We have global warming, other crises will kick in, maybe not so strong for Europe, but Europe is known for helping others. How can we prepare for stuff like that? It took too much time, and this was also something I think that made our politicians in every country very nervous because they didn't have the answer right away. Yeah. And we should prepare for the answers, which is not said that the supply chain with China should be cut. I mean, far from that. I'm not an expert, but it was impressive.
Mitigating the risks.
Yes, risk
distributing the risks, not everything in one basket. So
that's something we do in aviation almost every day. Mm-hmm. It's all about risk mitigation, about how to solve problems, how to change things when something impacted. Why have we not done this before on a global stage? That's a big question.
Good question.
Maybe aviation can help. I don't know.
As a
we
role
have professionals in that.
As a role model. In the end, I always have the question for my guests in 2023. Is there something you have changed in your personal life, may it be private or business, that you want to keep when all this stuff is over?
Well, one thing I want to keep is to understand that as long as you keep on moving and as long as you stay calm and focused, there is always a solution at the end. There's always light at the end of the tunnel. Listening to facts, listening to the experts, explicitly to experts with an outside view, listening to science, and after you have gathered as much information as you can, build your own mind. Don't listen to just hearsay things. With this, you will not be able to handle next crises, and you will not be able to handle this fast-moving world, because the world, one thing that didn't change, the world was still moving while we were all sitting at home.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us for our podcast. And I guess our listeners will be excited and everyone will be ignited for the joy of flying and going abroad. That was wonderful. Thank you very much.
It was a pleasure.
You've been listening to 2023. To get in touch with us with your comments or ideas, or if you'd like to be a guest on the show, just email hello@20-23.earth. You can find even more material, including transcripts of our interviews, on our website at 20-23.earth. Please keep in mind, the content of this podcast is our opinion. We work hard to get our facts right. However, if you find something that can be corrected or improved, please email us at hello@20-23.earth. If you haven't already done so, we'd be grateful if you would subscribe, rate, and review this podcast wherever you happen to listen. Thanks for listening, stay safe, and there will be springtime in 2023.